And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network and our family of broadcast affiliates right around the world. If you'd like to find out who is playing at what time, what show is playing at what time, here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for the X Zone TV channel on SimulTV, visit www.simultv.com. That's simultv.com. And in the search engine, just type in X Zone. My guest this hour, X Zone Nation, is Preston Dennett, and we've had the pleasure of having Preston on the show numerous times in the past. He began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and co-workers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and author of 26 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Joining me now is Preston Dennett. And Preston, welcome back to the X Zone. Great having you with us again.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Glad to be here.
All righty. You've got a new book that we're going to be talking about tonight. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's called Onboard UFO Experiences. Mm-hmm. It covers 15 first-hand accounts of each chapter focusing on one person who's been taken on board a craft.
Right.
Most of these people have had, a lifetime of experiences. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the pattern we do see. But yeah, and each of these people can tell you what it's like to be on board a UFO.
Now, all the descriptions of that the different people give of the craft, do they all match, or are they different crafts with different descriptions?
They match in a lot of details.
Mm-hmm.
They are different craft, and different types of ETs.
Right.
But there are some really startling corroborations.
Well, can you share a few with us?
Yeah, I think what I found most interesting was when people are taken into a craft,
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we've heard a million times how they describe indirect lighting source. That's
right.
Pretty well known. And rounded corners,
mm-hmm.
no corners, this sort of thing. But another thing that I've heard over and over again is a central column. This appears almost universally. People describe this sort of pole that rises up through the center of the craft. And in terms of windows or portholes, this is also very interesting. All of them describe that the craft itself, the walls, can turn transparent. Sometimes it's just a little portion. Wow. Sometimes it's the entire craft itself, which witnesses say can be very disorienting because they feel like they're falling for a second.
Right.
But yeah, I hear that quite a bit. So yeah, these details, they describe the walls as being extremely smooth,
mm-hmm.
Just smoother than glass in a way that's very hard to describe. So there's these certain little details that are just really consistent in case after case, whether it's a guy from England or a guy down in Louisiana, a guy over in West Virginia, all over the place, but it's almost the same description.
Now, is there any common thread between the people themselves? For example, are they of a certain age group? Are they of a certain religious background or ethnic group? Or is it right across the spectrum?
It's right across the spectrum. When I looked into these details, I looked into mm-hmm. Political affiliations. No pattern there. There's Democrats and Republicans.
Wow.
And there's different races for sure. There's one guy, he's black. There's mm-hmm. another guy, he's got some Asian blood. One guy, he's Latino.
Right.
So that does not seem to be a pattern there. A couple of people were Latino. In far as age, we do see a pattern there in that people who are having these experiences generally have an experience around age 5. That would be like the marker age. Maybe 6, occasionally a little bit earlier or later, but
Right.
5 is sort of that age where they have these grays usually coming into their bedroom and scaring the wits out of them.
Now, is this generational, or is there a connection between other family members who have also been abducted or experimented or brought up into the craft?
Generally speaking, yeah, I'm going to say it is generational, but not always. Or it's not remembered perhaps by prior generations or denied. But in many cases, we do see that people, I always ask, have your parents reported this type of thing? And yeah, it stretches back, multiple generations in some cases. Sometimes the grandparents don't look upon it as a alien phenomena. They see it more as perhaps spiritual or religious. There's different interpretations people take on this. I mean, some people feel like the ETs they saw were, quote, angelic. Another guy, he's like, I'm not sure these were ETs at all.
Really?
Yeah, because he's had a number of very bizarre experiences, which don't kind of fit the standard pattern of grays examining him. So he's wondering if this is some phenomena that puts on different masks and appears in different ways, whether it's a ghostly apparition. He's had a number of those. Weird-shaped UFOs of all different shapes, and other strange experiences that are very hard to categorize.
Now, do these people get taken up to the craft or into the craft throughout the years, or is this just a one-time event that they've been experiencing?
Well, it's not an easy question to answer. I think in some cases it is a one-time event, or appears to be. There was one case from a guy in Pennsylvania, Ron. He and his friends, they were like 13, 14 years old, were out skateboarding and saw this UFO. And Ron's like, oh my gosh, I'd love to go on a ride with these things, because he could look through the window of this object and he saw human-looking forms, silhouettes, normal-looking people as far as he could see. And the next thing he knows, he is on board. And he's looking at very beautiful humans, in jumpsuits. And he's sitting down on this little bench. There's an adult on either side of him who is just sitting there entranced and not talking, not moving. He tries to talk to them, but they don't answer. When these humanoids, there was a man and a woman, he said that they were very muscular, very, white, very good looking, almost genetically perfect in a weird way. Blue eyes, blonde hair. Took him up to this section of the craft, which turns transparent, and then looked out at this star field. And he just kept telling himself, this is amazing, I'm actually on board this UFO. He couldn't believe it. It's something he thinks about daily.
Sure.
And really is the only experience he's had like this. He's had a number of close-up sightings following this, as have his family members. But this one childhood experience was like pretty much it in terms of going on board.
Well, did I don't know if we can call them aliens, can the crew of the craft, did they perform any experiments on this young man?
I think it's very possible, yes, because he doesn't remember the whole experience.
Is that common, where people don't remember the entire experience?
Yeah, in fact, it's very common. We have something called doorway amnesia. It's very unusual for people to remember actually entering the craft. They'll see one hovering over them. They might see themselves being struck by a beam of light, but rarely do they actually. I mean, here's a good case. Kim Kamen. He worked as a mechanic for special forces in the military, a great witness.
All right, we're going to have to hold it here for a second, Preston, because I do have to take my break. And when we come back, let's hear about this case that you're going to start to tell us about. Exonation, Preston Dennett is our special guest. PrestonDennett.weebly. DENNETT.com is his website, and Preston and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue talking about Preston's newest book entitled Onboard UFO Encounters. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Book away. Welcome back, everyone. Preston Dennett is my guest this hour, and we're talking to Preston about his new book. It's entitled Onboard UFO Encounters. And if you'd like to get more information about Preston, see all the great books he's written, and if you'd like to contact him, visit his webpage at prestondennett.weebly.com. All right, Preston, just before we were going to go into the commercial break, you were going to start to tell us about one of the witnesses or one of the people that you interviewed for the book. So please continue.
Yeah, his name is Kim Kamen. He's from Illinois.
Right.
He worked as a mechanic for special forces in the military. Really good witness. It was 1994. He wakes up and he sees grays standing around his bed. And he hears them talking. They said, "Come with us. Don't be afraid. But we're not going to hurt you. Just relax. Everything's okay. Come with us."
Famous last words.
Right? This is what they always say.
Yeah.
But, this is 1994. He's well aware of grays. Has no prior experiences that he's aware of, though his brother did have an abduction experience, his twin brother. So that's kind of interesting because we do see that turn up in other cases, a sort of fascination with ETs about twins.
Really?
Yeah. It's very strange, but they do seem to be fascinated by twins. So there's a number of twin cases in the literature, and this is definitely one of them. 1994, and the Greys are like, "Come with us." He didn't argue with them, wasn't afraid, sort of unnaturally calm. Another thing we see, and they pull him out into his living room, and the back living room wall is gone. It's completely transparent. There's a UFO hovering right over the house, 20, 50 feet up. It's absolutely beautiful, covered with colored lights, which kind of entrance him. That's how they do it. I think that's what the purpose of a lot of these colored lights on UFOs are for, actually. They're necessarily sensing devices or navigation lights. I think they're to hypnotize the witness. Because that's what I keep hearing, right? They can't look away from these lights.
Yeah, something that's always amazed me, you have these craft with all these lights that are blinking, and yet very few people see them except the people who are having the experience.
In most cases.
Yeah.
There are cases, where people have an abduction experience and others around them do report UFOs at that time. And I think probably if someone's seeing a UFO, it's coming for somebody else.
It could be.
Hard to say.
All right, so the Greys bring him into the living room, and he gets into the living room. His wall is not there for all intents and purposes, but there's the UFO hovering over him.
Yep, they pull him out in the backyard. He can feel the grass on his feet, and this beam of light hits him. And boom, he's inside the craft. And this is what we call doorway amnesia. There are cases out there where people do remember being pulled upwards, a lot of them. But rarely do they see themselves actually going inside the craft. There's a break there. And that happens when people are being returned as well. And we're not quite sure what's going on there, but it's definitely curious. It's not universal, but it's pretty common. And he had a pretty much typical experience. He was laid out, examined. He remembered instruments coming down. One came for his eye, and one came for his arm. It marked a triangle on his arm, which remained for years and years. And that was basically the extent of the experience. He, remembers waking up back in bed. He immediately called his wife, who worked as a nurse, I believe, in a local hospital, and begged her to come home. She was doing the night shift. Finally, she did come home. But yeah, he was pretty freaked out about the whole thing and ended up actually going to the military doctor to get examined.
And what did the military doctor find?
Well, Kim told him the whole story. He's like, man, it's Greys. They did this to me. This is what I remember. And the doctor didn't bat an eye. He just looked at the mark and says, yeah, that doesn't appear psychosomatic. I can't tell you what caused it. And Kim's like, well, what am I supposed to do? And the doctor says, well, listen, you can either accept that this happened and move on, or, let it freak you out. Yeah. So basically, the doctor sounded like, he didn't say this, but he acted in a manner that said he had seen this type of thing before.
That's what it sounded like, huh? With all the people that have been taken up into crafts and had the examinations done on them, what do you think the aliens are looking for?
It's a $1 million question, isn't it? Genetics, certainly, because they do seem to be very interested in the human body for whatever reason. That's the most common thing we hear, is a physical examination. And a number of people do report seeing not only hybrid babies, but being basically introduced to young adults at this point who are their children. That's what happened to Dolly from Florida. She woke up one evening. She's had a number of experiences throughout her life, and went to the kitchen to just get a drink of water or juice or something, and there was these Greys. And one's looking at her, and she's like, why do you look familiar to me? She's freaking out because she's fully conscious, and they're standing right there, 5 feet away. And he says, you know me? And she said, no, I don't. He says, yes, you do. You know me. I'm your biological son. And that, of course, freaked her out, but she looked at him, she looked at him even more closely, and she did. She could actually see, not only was he like half gray, half human, but her family resemblance in this guy. She's like, how old are you? He's like, about 25 as you would measure it, but explained to her that time flows much differently for him, and that he's, in a way, much older.
Now, prior to these experiences, do a lot of these people have a set interest in UFOs, extraterrestrials? Do they like watching the television programs that focus in on ETs and UFOs, or are these just people who've never even considered the existence of UFOs or aliens before?
Usually have never considered it, because it happens very early on in life. And what can happen, it can turn you either way, into an interest in the stars and this sort of thing. That's what happened with Dolly. I mean, she became very interested in astronomy and this sort of thing, and embraced her experiences, and she feels they're very positive. Whereas another lady, Lynette, no, she hates Star Trek. A number of people told me how they abhor any science fiction, Star Trek, aliens, anything like that.
Well, William Shatner's acting has that effect on people.
That could be part of it. That can't say, but yeah, and that's something I've heard a number of times. It's just an aversion to anything to do with this subject. Anyone who has a very strong emotional reaction to the subject is sort of a red flag, indicating could be something going on here.
When these people come back, do they have full recall, or do they seem as if they've been having a dream? And do they bring anything back with them from the ship that could corroborate their stories?
In terms of an artifact, bringing back a alien ashtray or something?
Oh, yeah. Or a towel that says, I slept at the seedy motel.
Hey, something.
Oh, wait a minute. That was mine. Okay, sorry.
A thread. Anything, something. But no.
No way.
We don't have anything like that. I did a study of cases looking for that, and there are a number of cases where people have given rocks and stones, or that. I don't know if you remember Joe Simonton and the alien pancake.
Alien pancake?
Yeah, UFO had landed. This is a well-known case from, I believe it was, 60s or so.
Well, that's before my time.
UFO landed in Wisconsin, and the guy saw these human-looking ETs, and they gave him these pancake-type things. which ended up being, investigated by the FDA and Air Force labs, and turned out to be just normal buckwheat and things like this. So there have been a number of artifacts that turned out to be normal, or appeared to be normal.
Well, we know one thing for sure, Preston. They don't have Aunt Jemima in the in the outer parts of the galaxy, do they?
Guess not. So the whole alien artifact thing is very frustrating. We don't have enough proof to convince a diehard skeptic,
right.
I don't think. But if you're objective, and you look at the amount of evidence that's actually out there in the public arena, yes, you could prove this in a court of law, easy peasy, no problem.
Well, you say that, and yet we did a challenge. I forget, 2-3 years ago, we were doing a TV show called Paranormal Court TV. And we offered to fly anyone who has had an experience, who would want to present their case in a courtroom setting. There would be an honorarium, the entire gambit. No one took us up on it.
Wow. Yeah, well, I know a few people who probably could. I'm not sure if they would. There's one case, I think I may have told you about this.
All right, hold on, buddy. You've got it timed so well that you just start teasing me about a story, and then I've got to go to a break. So stand by. This is our news break at the bottom of the hour, X-Zone Nation. My guest this hour is Preston Dennett, and of course, Preston is a good friend of the X-Zone. And if you'd like to contact Preston, his website is www.prestondennett.weebly.com. We're talking to Preston this hour about his new book entitled On Board UFO Encounters. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Preston Dennett and I return as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology right here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Preston Dennett is my special guest this hour. We're talking to Preston about his new book entitled On Board UFO. Now, On Board UFO Encounters contains 15 all-new original cases of people who have been taken on board a UFO. None of them have been published before. What really happens when someone is taken on board an alien craft? Well, the answer may surprise you. These true first-hand accounts provide an extensive exploration deep into the heart of the UFO phenomenon and show just how fascinating and strange UFO contact can be. A wide variety of ETs are represented, including greys, praying mantis, human-looking ETs, hybrids, humanoids of all types. 15 ordinary people, each with who have had the extraordinary experience of being taken on board UFOs, have their stories here in Preston's new book entitled On Board UFO Encounters. All right. I'm not going to interrupt you again. Please continue with your story.
Yeah, I mean, each case does have certain amounts of evidence. Certainly the doctors that people deal with, the witnesses, that they upset the doctors in a number of these cases because they're like, well, what's this object here in your sinus cavity? You have something here in your arm. There's been unexplained healings of tumors and things like this. And people do get photographs as well. I mean, Joe Gardner, he's a guy from West Virginia, Huntington, West Virginia, who's had experiences his entire life, ongoing. And these objects, fairly recently have been coming down regularly to the point where he's able to show them to groups of people. All his friends and family have seen these things, and he's photographed them. He sent me some of these photographs, so there is evidence. I mean, you should talk to this guy. I mean, he would definitely. Some of these witnesses are very vocal about what's happened to them, and they want to let people know.
All right, the photographs that
Most
he
are
sent,
shy.
understandably, the photographs that this person sent you, what do they look like to you, Preston?
Some are better than others, but they show what appear to be unexplained objects. One clearly shows a saucer-shaped object right up there in the sky. I wouldn't, and coupled with the fact that he's willing to put his name behind it and has a testimony about how he took the photo, to me makes it a very good photo. And he has, character witnesses,
right.
Other people who were there with him at the time who saw it as well.
Now, were there other people? Were any of these craft identified or targeted by radar? Were there reports in the media? Were there reports with law enforcement or the military?
Generally, no.
No.
Sometimes these do occur during waves, and there are reports of sightings in the area. But in terms of on radar, no. At least the witnesses haven't pursued that, and I wasn't able to find radar verification on this particular incident, at least.
Do they supply you with doctors' reports and affidavits?
In some cases, not in all. So some cases are definitely better than others, no doubt about it. When people have an ongoing experience for their entire life, the evidence starts to build up. And to them, it becomes irrelevant, because while people are interested in knowing if this is true or not,
right,
they don't care at this point. They know it's real, and they're sometimes having a hard time with it.
Well, knowing that it is real or knowing that it is a real experience depends on their beliefs. For example, just because they believe it to be real doesn't mean it is real, right?
Strictly speaking, yeah, but that still doesn't make any difference to them take this guy from England, Gary, I call him. He doesn't want his name used.
Okay.
Is not happy with what's happening to him.
Well, what's happening?
He did have, grays coming to his room as a young boy. He lived in an abusive family. They didn't understand. He got no help. Finally got out of there and started living a productive life. But he was around 20 years old when he woke up and thought he was in a hospital. He had been in a few bike accidents, and had been in hospital before, but expecting to see a doctor, he did not see that. He saw a very tall gray, and he said it had no compassion for him. He was laid out on a table, and it had this big, long, sort of syringe-like needle, and it pierced his temple with it.
Wow.
It was very, very painful. He cursed, and he screamed at this gray, who didn't even react. Felt like he was just a lab rat or at the kennel or something. And says these guys don't believe in anesthesia. He's got nothing but bad names for them. And woke up the next morning immediately upset and rushes to the bathroom and looks in the mirror, and there's, sure enough, a wound in his head, a red puncture wound. So is that proof? Hard to say it, but he definitely relates it to this experience.
Well, you see, I would have considered it proof if he would have gone to the doctor and said, hey, listen, you're going to think I'm nuts, but this is what I think happened. Can you check that hole in my head and tell me what it is?
Yeah, well, that's what, Jim Schaefer, is that his name? I believe that's his name, did. He's actually up in Canada, very near where the Falcon Lake incident was with Stephen McCallick.
Yeah.
Very famous landing. He lived in that area and had all kinds of experiences. And he'd wake up, his foot would be broken. He had puncture wounds, cuts. Went to the doctor and said, "Doctor, I think I'm having UFO experiences." And the doctor's like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on here?" And so he was very forthright with his doctors and was diagnosed with cancer, actually, and had the tumor disappear overnight. He was, this is prior to having scheduled surgery, about a week or two away. Goes to the doctors for his surgery, and they're like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And he was explained, I think it was the ETs. He doesn't remember, but he had missing time. And they're like, "Wow," and They removed, they did the operation anyway because there was necrotic tissue, but found no cancer, and wrote in his file, miraculous healing. He showed me the pictures. He showed me the file. So, yeah, I mean, is that proof? Very close to it. I mean, and there's other cases with outstanding medical evidence. I think medical evidence is some of the best evidence we have.
If it is substantiated with a doctor's report, I agree.
And the witness is willing to come forward, and and have the whole thing reviewed.
Right.
But we've got landing trace cases as well, which are pretty impressive. I mean, the whole Rendlesham Forest incident, that has some impressive landing trace cases.
Except when you get Colonel Halt and the other boys talking about it, their stories contradict each other now.
Yeah, stories. Well, that's a massive account with all kinds of witnesses. It's not surprising there are contradictions.
But when you're talking to Colonel Halt, who was the OIC there and the senior officer of this entire event, and he is he's just saying that, well, the other guys, they're wrong, they didn't see this, and these kind of comments, it puts a big question mark onto the entire event.
Yeah, it tarnishes the case,
exactly.
No doubt.
Yeah.
But that, that's a massive case.
It truly is a massive case.
I haven't specialized in that one. I mean, it's got like 10 books on it at least. Many witnesses, a lot of reports which do stand up corroborating each other.
But once again, as we know, just because the people having the encounter could not identify the source of the light, the source of the sound, or the identity of the craft itself does not mean that this was something from out of this world.
Hey, some of the witnesses are right there with you.
Yeah.
Others are fully convinced that they're dealing with ETs from another planet, but others are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be military. I don't know what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
But they do. When you see a gray in front of you, it's hard to come away from any other conclusion that you're dealing with something, that's other. In the case of Gary, he had one of these things in his house, and this has happened before, and usually he just blacks out. Well, he sees this thing, he runs up to it and chokes it, grabs it by the neck, and this thing starts telepathically screaming at him, "Get off, get off, get off," and its arms are windmilling all over the place, and then boom, something hits him from behind and he blacks out. But that's not the only case where people have attacked grays and been successful for at least a few minutes.
Okay, but here's another question. Do they ever come back with anything under their fingernails from scratching these grays or from fighting with these grays?
Yeah, we need more forensic investigation to follow, an immediate UFO abduction event, which we're not getting that kind of money and attention put towards this. I'm not trained for that.
Right.
I'm a bookkeeper. I'm doing the best I can. I've been doing this for 35 years practically. So things are getting better. I think we are building up we've got a giant database for sure.
Right.
But as far as what you're looking for, solid.
All right, I'm asking for the impossible. I know I am. But hey, listen.
Alien body.
I'd love to see one of those. All right, listen, you and I have to take our final break for this hour. In Exo Nation, our good friend Preston Dennett is with us tonight. We're talking to Preston about his new book that's entitled On Board UFO Encounters, and visit his website at www.prestondennett.weebly.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, my special guest, Preston Dennett, as we continue searching for the truth. It's out there. We just have to find it. I'll be back. Don't go away. Preston Dennett is our special guest this hour. Exonation, www.prestondennett.weebly.com. He's got a new book out to add to his collection of books that he has written over the years. And by the way, he is a great author. I love reading his books. This one is entitled Onboard UFO Encounters. And again, www.weebly.com. PrestonDennett.weebly.com. Preston, when these people are taken, are there any reports of them not coming back?
This does happen.
It does, eh?
Yeah, it's not super common. There are, scattered cases in the literature.
Mm-hmm.
I know of a case in Hobbs, New Mexico. I know of Felix Moncla disappeared over Lake Superior. He was vectored towards a UFO, saw it on radar, and he was gone. There is one case in the book that does seem to involve this. It's an unusual case, and I wasn't able to verify it as much as I'd like, but the witness is absolutely sincere.
Mm-hmm.
It involved a group of teenagers, 18, 19, 20, who had gone to a cabin in the high desert here in Southern California, as something they regularly did. One of them owned the cabin or had relatives that did. And they just hang out, drink beer. And one of these guys disappears for a period of hours to the point where everyone's concerned, finally comes back with this wild story about coming upon a landed UFO.
Okay.
And everyone's like, yeah, right. Now, the guy I talked to, Tony, knew this guy well, knew that he wasn't the kind of guy who kidded. His name was Paul. And Paul's like, no, honest to God, they were very nice. They looked mostly human, but he described sort of a hybrid gray.
Right.
Said the ship was very clean. He was invited on board. They told him they're studying this area. It was all white. They wore white uniforms. It was all a pleasant experience. It was very quick. And they invited him to go with them. And he's like, I don't think I don't think so. And they said, well, we're going to come back here in a year on this day. And if you want to come with us, show up. And so this is the story he told. And everyone's like, yeah, right. But a year goes by, and this guy, Paul, starts giving away his stuff. He's telling everyone he's going to go.
Wait a minute. Was this guy somewhere in Vancouver, in British Columbia?
No, this is here in Southern California.
Okay, because there's a similar story that was covered by the CBC up here, and it parallels what you're telling me. I'm telling you, there are other cases like this. There are a lot of human disappearances, by the way, that are unsolved. Yeah, this guy wrote his parents a letter, left it there, and that's the last time he has been seen.
So this guy, Paul, Tony goes up and he's like, are you going to go there? And Paul's like, I don't know. I'm gonna check it out.
Right.
I'm not sure I'm gonna go with them. But drives up there alone and doesn't come back. So Tony, his friends, and Paul's family all go up there and find his car. The keys are in it. It's right where, by the cabin. But he's never seen again.
Wow.
They call the police. The police do a whole investigation, missing persons report. No one was accused of anything because it was pretty clear what must have happened. He disappeared himself, whether on a UFO or what have you. We don't know.
On purpose, yeah. Listen, since you and I last talked, there's been a lot of controversy about the USS Nimitz and the Tic Tac. What's your take on it?
I think it's part of a complex of other experiences going on in that area. This is a very active area for USO activity off the Southern California coast.
Yeah, it's off Catalina Island, isn't it?
Right. That incident took place a little bit more south, but as the UFO flies, who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's clear that our military knows quite a bit more about this. There was a Freedom of Information request put out on this, and it was denied, saying the material that would entail being released is far too sensitive. So they do know something. We're not sure how much they know, but I've certainly talked to a number of military witnesses in this area who said flat out, it's not us, and I can tell you that we're completely baffled by what we're seeing. Some of these are fairly high-ranking people, a Coast Guard captain, a submarine navigator, a petty officer, an electrician's mate on the USS Clamagore. He had an experience. So a lot of the military is encountering this, and the policy is just not to talk about it.
How close do you think we are to disclosure?
Well, we've had it to a certain extent. I mean, there is a lot of disclosure that's just popping out at the seams. I think we're years away from what people would dream of.
Yeah, for God's sake, just land, get it over with. Let Fox News and CNN do the coverage, and all right, hi, you're here, yay, shake your hand, away you go, and on to bigger and better things.
Years away, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Because I came in this field in 1988, 86, and there was buzz then about disclosure.
Oh, yeah.
Open official contact.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen it. It's kind of a carrot on the stick.
Every time I talk to Stephen Bassett, he's always saying, oh, we're nearly there. We're nearly there. And I've been doing this show for 30 years. Yeah, we're nearly there. Well, Stephen, how much longer is it going to take? Because I'm not going to be around for that much longer, buddy.
We're going to get some very high-level officials trying to disclose this. We're going to get leaks. We're going to get whistleblowers. And we're going to get, at some point, an official government statement, probably some small country who people are like, do we really believe, Chile or, some, maybe not a major superpower. But I think it's coming. It wouldn't surprise me if it's 20, 30 years, we start getting some real action.
Really, yeah. Talking about the different types of extraterrestrials that the people you interviewed for your new book were talking about, praying mantis and then the greys and then the human hybrid. Is their physiology as such that they require to breathe oxygen, that they require the same physiological attributes that we need as humans?
We don't know. According to Dolly, she's like, they need to breathe just like us. She's had a lot of interactions with them, just as they do eat. But I have not been able to get real good detail on that. I find it very curious that when someone's taken on board a UFO, they can breathe. Pretty much normally, almost universally. Sometimes people do have trouble breathing. But they don't get crushed to the floor in excess gravity, and they're generally not floating around, though that does happen in some cases. So there's sort of a human equivalency that seems, I don't know, it's very strange.
Do we have any idea where these aliens are coming from? Because if we're talking about greys, or we're talking about, humanoid hybrids, if we're talking about praying mantises, how can they all be coming from the same place?
Yeah, I don't think they are. People talk about interdimensionality. I'm convinced that we're dealing with physical beings who pilot ships, probably from other star systems. But generally, no, they don't say where they're from. In one case, Ann Witherspoon, she's from the Midwest. She, I believe it was Indiana. She's had a lot of experiences, and one was fully conscious. A gray came right into her bedroom and said, "We need to talk. I love you," it told her.
Wow.
Which really got her attention. And it held up these little brass-looking discs and said, "This is where we're from." And there were markings on the discs that looked like a sort of a solar system. And this gray told her that they were from not a binary star system, a paired star system. I forget what he called it, but they were pretty specific about it. But even that doesn't say where they're really from.
Yeah,
it's just sort of like, we're from a star system. Okay, where's that? So she didn't get a whole lot of information, but more than the average person. One lady was apparently taken to another planet as a young child. She said that the flora and fauna was completely different. It was a much lighter gravity. She could breathe the air, but the structures were different. Everything was different.
Amazing stories. Where can people get a copy of your book, my friend?
It's not out yet. It's due out any day, so you're getting kind of the scoop here.
Ooh, thank you.
And, it should be, 2 weeks, I'm going to say. But these things have a tendency to be unpredictable, but
That's true.
But they're coming right up. Yep.
Especially if they get abducted by aliens on the way. Preston,
I hope it doesn't happen.
I hope so too, my friend. What's your next book about?
Working on several. I want to do one on paranormal stories of like supernatural survival. People who've been rescued by ghosts, had their, that sort of thing, saved their life in disaster situations. So I'm working on that. Working on another UFO contact book, which I'm super excited about. Maybe one on out-of-body experiences.
Wow. So you're a busy man.
Lined up. You know it.
All right. Listen, Preston, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure talking to you, my friend. Continued success. And Exonation, if you'd like to get more information about Preston Dennett, visit his website at www.prestondennett.weebly.com. And we've been talking to Preston this hour about his new book that's coming out in a couple of weeks entitled On Board UFO Encounters. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.